12 losses in a row. The 2026 New York Mets have now lost 12 consecutive games. I mean, what more can you say about that, really? What more can you say about that? Well, we're going to talk about that here today because, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 1 of the ChampMind Culture Podcast. I am your host, Mitch Ciccarelli, and guys, it's been a minute. It's actually been quite a few minutes since the last time I did a video here. Kind of taking a little bit of a hiatus. A lot of things have been going on. A lot of good things, I will say. I've been keeping busy. I've recently, I say recently, it's been a year now since I relocated to Little Rock, Arkansas. I'll be honest with you, this place has a bad rep, and I can see why. I can definitely see why. There's some a lot of crime that goes on here in Little Rock, but if you can get past that, it's actually a beautiful place. It's actually, I'm joking, but I'm actually serious. It's actually pretty nice here. But I've been keeping busy, really been enjoying my time here. But I've been wanting to come back. I've been wanting to bring this podcast back and get back to what the original intent was. Because the original intent of this YouTube channel was about mindset, right? It was about diving into the mindset of professional athletes, world champion athletes. You know, what makes or breaks them. When we talk about teams, when we talk about professional sports teams, it's all about culture, right? What makes a winning culture and what breaks a culture in the case of the Mets, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. But that's really what the original plan was for this channel, and I kind of deviated away from that, and I kind of started becoming more of a handicapper channel, talking about sports betting, breaking down MMA fights, making fight predictions, and I might still do some of that here and there, but I really wanted to get back into culture and sports psychology, and I'm in school right now for sports psychology. And I thought, man, no better time to bring this back, to bring back the ChampMind Culture Podcast than right now. And as I was kind of contemplating, what did I want the first episode to be about? Did I want to get a guest on? Did I want to bring a co-host on? Right? Who did I want to talk to? What did I want to talk about? And I'll be honest with you, man, when you start thinking about that, you kind of get into this procrastinating mindset because you keep putting things off. You're like, I'll do it tomorrow. I'll find a guest tomorrow, or I'll start this thing tomorrow. And tomorrow never happens, right? What was that one quote in Rocky 3 when Rocky Balboa is sparring with Apollo Creed and he's dragging ass and he's not giving forth that effort. He doesn't have that eye of the tiger, right? And Apollo Creed is looking at him like, what are you doing, Rock? What are you doing? You got to get it together. And what does Rocky tell him? He says, tomorrow, Apollo, we'll do it tomorrow. There is no tomorrow, Rock. There is no tomorrow. There is no tomorrow. So I'm sitting there last night and, I'm using ChatGPT to come up with the new logos for the show and all these cool thumbnails, which, by the way, AI is absolutely insane, folks. I mean, it is so evolved now. I remember when I was doing this 2 years ago, and I would try to use ChatGPT to create a logo and create some kind of a design, and it just would come out with just the most garbage. It wouldn't even come anywhere close to what the prompt was. It would, create pictures and characters with like headless people or the wrong face on the wrong person, and it was a disaster. But now, I mean, you guys look at the thumbnail right now; it's a pretty clean thumbnail, I would think, right? It's a pretty clean thumbnail, and that was all ChatGPT. So shout out ChatGPT and OpenAI. But anyway, I'm sitting there last night, right? I'm trying to think of what to do, and as soon as the Mets blew another game, as soon as Devin Williams just imploded, the whole team imploded, right? I said, you know what, man, this is the perfect topic. This is the perfect topic, man. So let's get right into it. And guys, let me preface this by saying I am by no means a technical baseball expert. I was a terrible baseball player, man. I only played Little League, and I sucked at that. I mean, I was complete ass. I was a terrible baseball player. So, you will not hear me get up here and criticize these guys from a technical standpoint. I mean, I might do that a little bit, but that's what fans do, right? That's part of being a fan. And I am a baseball fan, and I can talk about baseball all day long when it comes to a fan's perspective, but I was never a player, right? But I will talk to you guys about leadership, about building a winning team, building a winning culture, right? Establishing that unity, because that's something that, I feel like I have a pretty good grasp on. I've been in the Air Force now 15 years. I'm a senior non-commissioned officer. I have mentored and led countless airmen. I was a ROTC cadre member at KU back in 2022. And I just, man, that's just always been kind of like one of my strengths. And that's really why I started this channel and why I'm studying sports psychology right now through GCU. Because I'm passionate about it, man. I'm passionate about, being that transformational leader and taking a team that, is falling short and rallying them together and, completely turning things around. So I am not an expert, right? And I've never worked in Major League Baseball. I have no knowledge on, what these guys are actually saying to each other behind the scenes. So everything I'm going to say here is all my opinion and speculation. But I wanted to be very clear there when it came to that. Just so, because there's always going to be people commenting, oh, who's this guy? He doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. Have you ever swung a bat before? Like, shut up, dude. Anyway, let's talk about what the problem is. Because I identified the what, right? The what is they have lost 12 games in a row. They are now 9 games below 500. So what caused this, right? What is the problem? And there's a couple of things here, man. I will say the biggest problem is you got a team of individually good players on paper. Like, you take a lot of these guys. I mentioned Francisco Lindor earlier. You take him. On his best day, you could make the argument this is the best shortstop in all of baseball. I mean, you can't say that now. The guy sucks. But when he is on, when he is locked in, you could make that argument. You look at a lot of other guys here. Bo Bichette, man, this guy was a clutch hitter with the Toronto Blue Jays. He comes to the Mets. He forgets how to hit a damn baseball, right? You take all these guys. Freddie Peralta, we signed this guy. He was supposed to be our ace pitcher. He's been pretty mediocre. But here's the thing, man. Here's the trend. Individual good players that are not coming together as a team, and they do not have any accountability. There's no leader in that clubhouse. And again, I'm not in that clubhouse, so this is speculation, but a lot of people have reported on this, man. A lot of people in the know, a lot of media guys that do have access to that clubhouse. I mean, it doesn't take a rocket science to see there's nobody that's really leading this team. And that starts, obviously, from the top down. We're going to talk about the owner, we're going to talk about the GM, the manager, and then we'll get into the players. But accountability is the biggest issue, man. Accountability is the biggest issue. The second biggest issue, they have no identity. This team has zero identity and zero purpose. It's just a bunch of overpaid divas that are getting paid ridiculous amounts of money to play a child's game. But you could tell, like, there's no passion there. There's no, identity. I talk about that word identity, man. Think back to the last time that this franchise won a World Series. Going back to 1986, and I know that was before my time. I wish I was alive to watch that team, man. I've watched all the documentaries. I've done my research. Really would have loved to have been alive back then. I often wonder if I'm actually going to be alive to watch this team win a World Series in my lifetime. I hope so. But anyway, I digress. The 1986 Mets were the bad boys of Queens, right? They were They were the villains of Major League Baseball, man, and everybody hated them. And they were just rough, nasty, you know, crackheads that were banging broads and doing drugs and fighting and none of those things I would recommend. Let me be let me be very clear with that. I am not saying that this team should just all of a sudden just start snorting some crack and hooking up with strippers and, you know, getting into brawls in bars. But what I'm trying to say is, man, this team had an identity. The identity was they were the villains. Everybody hated them. And they all embraced that. And they all came together. And they were able to build something really, really special. 2024, let's even go back just 2 years ago, man, when this team was in even worse shape than they are now. Again, they were 11 games below 500 in May. Nobody thought that they were going to even come close to sniffing the postseason. And what happened? They had Grimace. Yes, the McDonald's character Grimace, the purple gremlin. This guy comes out, whoever was wearing the costume threw out the first pitch. I don't know what it was. It was McDonald's night, McDonald's bobblehead night, Ronald McDonald kiss my ass night or something. But Grimace comes out there and throws the first pitch. And all of a sudden, the Mets are just dominating. They're just on fire. They are just riding this wave. They had an identity, and they had leaders. They had these guys like J.D. Martinez who have been there before, who were able to communicate with the younger guys and even some of the other veterans and get them on the same page. But they had a purpose. And, man, that team made it all the way to the National League Championship Series, the NLCS, one series away from the World Series. And yeah, sure, they got clobbered by the Dodgers. Who's not getting clobbered by the Dodgers, man? That's the best team in baseball. But purpose, identity, right? Go back to all the other years. Well, I say that like they've had a lot of all other years where they've been successful, but they have had a few, right? 2015, when last time they made it to the World Series, right? They had an identity there, man. Think back to that moment. And a lot of people say, you know, Yoenis Cespedes single-handedly carried the team, and he did. I mean, he absolutely did when they made that trade for him. But I will say, man, I think the moment that really changed things for them was when they were rumored to trade away, and now I'm forgetting the name of this guy, man. Oh man, their outfielder. And I'm recording this live, so I don't want to stop here. But anyway, they were going to trade away one of their outfielders, right? And they were in the middle of a game, and the news broke. Wilmer Flores. There we go. Wilmer! How can you forget Wilmer Flores? There was a rumor going around that Wilmer Flores was going to be traded to the Milwaukee Brewers for Carlos Gomez. And there were some fans at Citi Field that, you know, they read the news and they were, you know, saying things to Wilmer during the game, right? Like out in the outfield. They're like, hey, good luck in Milwaukee. You know, like you just got traded. And this was a kid that grew up with this franchise. It's all he ever knew. He was drafted by the Mets, and that was his family. And, you know, to hear that they don't want you anymore, to hear that, you know, they are getting rid of you and they're bringing somebody else in, he got emotional, and it showed on the field. I mean, he was crying out there on the field. And then you come to find out after the game that the trade was off and that he's not getting traded and he's staying with the team. And it was really awkward. And he goes out there, I think the next game or the next series, and hits a walk-off home run. And, man, everybody rallied behind him. The fans rallied behind him more than ever. The players rallied behind him more than ever. And that really helped build that identity. And then, obviously, they bring in Cespedes. And, yeah, that's when things took off. But that team had purpose. That team had an identity. This team does not have that. So we're going to get into that here in a second, man. But let's go back to accountability. Let's go back into accountability. So let's start with the owner. Steve Cohen purchased this team almost 6 years ago now. I believe it was early 2021. It was right after, actually, it might have been 2020. I think it was right after the 2020 COVID season, which we all want to forget, right? And man, I can tell you from a Mets fan perspective, we were all jumping up for joy when we heard this news, because here's a guy that's not only a billionaire, a multi-billionaire, the richest owner in all of sports, or at least in all of baseball, buying our team from the Wilpons, we used to call them the coupons, because they were just cheap. They wouldn't spend the money to sign the big free agent. They were just what we considered lousy owners, right? Laissez-faire leaders. So when we found out Steve Cohen was buying this team, and not only was he rich, but a lifelong fan of this franchise, or so he claimed, right? That was his big thing. He was a lifelong Mets guy. We're actually learning that might not be entirely true. But man, we were all pumped up because we thought we were getting our George Steinbrenner. If you guys remember, if you're old enough to remember, back in the 90s when the Yankees had that evil empire, the dream team, it seemed like they were winning almost every World Series, signing every big free agent. George Steinbrenner was the owner of the franchise, and man, he was obsessed with winning, obsessed with it. And I posted this the other night on my Facebook page, and I said, man, we thought we were getting George Steinbrenner, but could you imagine if the Yankees lost 12 games in a row in the late 90s? Could you imagine what George Steinbrenner would have done? I mean, that guy would have blown a gasket. He would have went scorched earth on that team. Everybody would have been fired. Everybody would have been fired. And you could agree with that or disagree with that. He was an interesting character, and at times, he didn't have the best reputation. He was kind of a nut job, but he held his team accountable, and that was a big reason why those Yankee teams were so successful back in the day, right? We don't have that. We have an owner right now that is, and look, again, I don't know what he's saying behind the scenes, but in the media, rather than holding his guys accountable, he's using the opportunity to badmouth the fans, to make condescending comments towards the fan base, and just kind of have this like nonchalant attitude, or he's attending basketball game. He was at the Knicks game the other day, and I mean, it's like, look, you can't criticize a guy for living his life. What's he supposed to do? But I mean, I don't know, maybe come out and make a statement, right? And that statement would be, you got to fire somebody. You got to fire somebody. Look, I like Carlos Mendoza, the manager of the New York Mets. He's a good guy. I was really, when he started in 2024, like I mentioned, man, that team made it further than anybody thought they would make it. You got to give Carlos Mendoza a lot of credit for doing that at the time. But I mean, what has he done since that season, man? I mean, 2025 was a complete collapse, and you can blame him for a lot of the managerial decisions that cost the Mets a lot of those games. You can blame him for a lot of what's going on this year so far, and rightfully so, right? I mean, look, you can like the person, you can like Carlos Mendoza, but you got to hold him accountable, and he has been terrible the last 2 seasons. Accountability's tough, man. Accountability is one of the things many leaders struggle with, and I will tell you, I struggle with it too. I still struggle with it to this day because, we want to be, those of us that pride ourselves on being inspirational, right? Transformational leaders. We want to build those relationships with our team, right? We want to have that positive rapport, establish that trust. We want our players, or in my case, my airmen, to come to us and not be afraid to talk to us, right? And all good things, all things that a good leader should have that mindset. But there's got to be balance, man, and there's got to be accountability. And when guys aren't doing their job, when they're not meeting the standard, you got to hold them accountable. I'm going through that right now. I'm not going to obviously go into specifics. But, like holding somebody, one of my subordinates, accountable right now, I've had to do it in the past, and it's never easy. It's never an easy thing to do. It's honestly the worst part about my job is having to give anybody paperwork or do, administrative discipline, right? But that's what they pay you for, man, and that's what the job is, and that's what leadership is. Because listen, at the end of the day, man, we can sit here and we can talk about being inspirational, and we can talk about, we want to fire our guys up and mold them in the right onto the right path and elevate them and all this good stuff, man. But if they're not doing their job, if they're not meeting standards, and you are not doing anything about it, you are not going to help them grow. You are not going to help them progress in their career, and you're just furthering the piles of crap. That's what you're doing. And that's what Steve Cohen is doing, in my opinion. Like, yes, he's the owner. He's not running baseball operations, but the guys that he has put in that job, he needs to hold them accountable. And he's not. Let's talk about the guy that he put in charge of baseball operations. Let's talk about the boy genius. Let's talk about the guy that thinks he's the smartest human being in baseball, when in all actuality, I think he is one of the dumbest people in all of baseball. Let's talk about David Stearns, the GM or the president of baseball operations, whatever his title is, president of piling garbage. Let's talk about David Stearns. This is another guy, man. This is another guy that claims to be a lifelong Mets fan. He grew up in New York, but he's so tone deaf. You would think a guy that grew up in New York, that's a fan of this team, would speak the language, would know how to communicate when the team sucks, communicate to the fan base. But every time he's up there getting interviewed, he's got the smug look on his face, like he's the smartest guy in the room. Well, the decisions that he's been making over the last couple of seasons, I mean, you guys ever watched the movie Moneyball? Based on, obviously, a true story with the Oakland Athletics, the Oakland A's, and Billy Beane, who was the GM of that team. One of the first teams to start using analytics back in the early 2000s. And, they went on this incredible win streak. They won like 22 games in a row. And that was kind of the catalyst of what we see now with the game, how analytics are such a huge part of the sport. But it's kind of funny because, the moves that David Stearns have been making, for example, signing Jorge Polanco to be the first baseman when the guy has never played first base at the major league level in his life. You sign him to be the replacement for Pete Alonso. That's something that you see out of that Moneyball movie. And at the time, with Scott Hatteberg, when the A's did it, when they needed a replacement for Jason Giambi, it was smart, and it was something that nobody had ever done before, and it actually worked out in their favor, because on-base percentage was something that not a lot of teams were looking at, and Hatteberg got on base, and that was something that actually was laughed at the time, ended up kind of working out for them. This is totally different, man. This is completely different, because you're not the Oakland A's. You're not a small market team with an owner that is giving you pennies and nickels and dimes to sign players. You have a multi-billionaire as the owner. And Steve Cohen has spent the money. I'll tell you that, man. Steve Cohen, if he has done one thing right, which you can argue is wrong at the same time, he's spent money where no other Mets owner has done. He signed Juan Soto away from the New York Yankees. That is something that would be unheard of just 6 years ago. You would never see that. You would never see a free agent that was with the Yankees opt to sign with the Mets. I mean, actually, you would. There's instances where that happened, right? Curtis Granderson, guys like that. I'm talking about like the biggest free agent that's going to be worth the biggest amount of money. You would never see that. And the Mets were able to do that. Steve Cohen threw the bank to sign Juan Soto. He spent the money to sign a lot of other big-name free agents, big-name players. But he spent the money unwisely in a lot of ways. But anyway, back to David Stearns. You don't have a poor owner. So why are you playing Moneyball when every other team is using analytics, right? You sign a guy in Jorge Polanco who's not a first baseman and is injury prone. And what happened? The guy's already injured. He's already on the IL. You trade away Brandon Nimmo, who is one of your best offensive bats, and in my opinion, was one of the heartbeats of the organization. And yeah, you could make the argument, okay, that the core group of guys that the Mets had over the last couple of years, Nimmo, Alonso, McNeil, right? Like they weren't winning. They never won with these guys. So we have to split up the core, right? Okay, fine. I get that. But you got rid of the wrong guys, in my opinion, man. Brandon Nimmo is a guy, I will take him on my team any given day. This is a guy that, regardless of whether he's going to get a base hit or a line drive out to the outfield or he's getting walked, the guy's hustling to first base. This guy plays with passion every single day. And offensively, he was one of the best players on the team. You trade him for a guy in Marcus Semien, who is almost 40 years old, who used to be a very good player, used to have the offense, used to be a power hitter, right? He's lost that over the years. And yeah, his defense is still very good. That was the selling point. It was like, okay, we got to focus on run prevention. We're all about run prevention this year. And Semien is defensively better, so this is a trade that we need to do. And that's my best David Stearns voice. I could probably do a better impression of David Stearns if I had my thumb up my butt. But anyway, this has got to get out of hand. I'm rambling here. But my point is this, man. He's made a lot of bonehead decisions. And, again, you're the GM of this franchise. You're not holding anybody accountable. Let's go back to Carlos Mendoza here, because this is the guy that if you want to criticize anybody having to hold the team accountable, it is the manager. He is the leader of the on-field team. And for him to keep getting in front of the media as these losses keep piling up, and all he has to say is, well, I mean, we're just, we're all pissed. I mean, we're all pissed about it, but I mean, things were going well, early in the game. And, what can you do? No, you need to light a fire under this team. You need to flip a freaking table, bro. And I don't know if he's done that or not. I don't think he has. I really don't. I don't see him doing that. I don't see him going back there and getting in guys' faces and calling out players that are not hustling, calling out guys that are not showing up with passion. He should be benching these guys. And I don't give a damn if it's Lindor, if it's Bichette. I don't give a damn what they're getting paid, man. If you don't come out and you don't play the game with passion and you're making all these mental lapses, you should get benched at least one game. You should at least send that message to the rest of the players that, hey, man, you're going to be held accountable here. We have standards. Guys, that's what accountability is, man. Again, it's not easy to do because we all want to be friends with everybody. We want to be positive. We want to be, we want to have the nice, positive relationships. And I'm not telling you not to. I absolutely, and in fact, anytime I will talk about how to build those, build that winning culture, you got to have that. You got to have that relationship with your team. But you got to hold them accountable. And that's a hard thing to do because people instinctively shy away from confrontation, shy away from difficult conversations. And I'll use myself as an example here, man. I still struggle with that. I'm not gonna tell you guys I'm perfect at that. I'm not gonna sit here and tell you that I've absolutely mastered how to do that. No. Every time I've had to give somebody paperwork or every time I've had to counsel somebody, one of my airmen, dude, I stay up at night thinking about it, man. I'll be honest with you, I lose sleep over it sometimes because I just don't look forward to it. I hate having to do it. But you know what? At the end of the day, I do it. And there's times where I should have done it more, and there's times where I haven't done it in the past, and I've learned from that. But if you do not hold your people to the standard, they will never grow. Your team will never grow. And you're holding everybody back. So that, to me, when we really talk about why does this team suck as badly as it does, accountability. It starts and ends with that. And you need leaders. And that transitions perfectly into the next segue, because let's talk about the players. You know, you can sit there, you can blame the owner, you can blame the GM, you can blame the manager, you can blame the coaches, and you absolutely should. Every single one of them from the top down has to have a certain level of blame, must accept a certain level of blame, in their own way, right? But they're not out there playing the game. They're not out in the field. They're not swinging the bat. They're not throwing the ball. They're not playing the game. The players are. And at the end of the day, guys, these guys are getting paid ridiculous amounts of money to look like garbage, to look like a little league team. Let's talk about the guy that everybody says or used to say should have been the captain of the Mets. Let's talk about Francisco Lindor. When he first came to this organization via trade from the Cleveland Guardians, or back then they were still the Cleveland Indians, and when we brought him in 2021, man, I was hyped. I was pumped up, man. This is the first big move that Steve Cohen, I mean, it wasn't Steve Cohen, it was the GM, but it was Steve Cohen, man. He was the guy that was kind of, you know, he was the one that made it happen, and he's the one that signed him to a multi-year extension after they got the trade done. It was the first big power move that Steve Cohen made, bringing Lindor over. And, you know, he had a rocky start in 2021. I mean, a terrible start. He didn't hit well in 2021 at all. But he showed moments of leadership. Like, I remember watching a game, and I forget the name of the reliever that was trying to, you know, get through the inning. I think the bases were loaded, 2 outs. This young relief pitcher who just got called up from the minors was charged with getting the Mets out of this inning unscathed. And he was struggling a little bit at first. He was throwing a lot of balls, and he couldn't find the strike zone. And I remember the pitching coach came out and went to talk to him, and all the infielders came in, and they all had a conversation. And I remember seeing Lindor do something that you don't typically see an infielder do with a pitcher. Because after the pitching coach walked away, and after all the other players went back to their position, Lindor stayed and he talked to that pitcher. And I don't know what he said to him, but whatever he said, it worked, because the guy went out there and struck the batter out, and Lindor is going nuts. He's pumping his fist and he's showing that passion. And you know what, man? You can sit there and say, oh, well, you know, who wants a cheerleader, right? I don't want a cheerleader. I want a guy that's actually going to perform. And I agree with you. But that to me was cool. That to me showed, like, hey, man, you know what? This guy, his bat's going to get going eventually. But you can't teach, well, you can teach that, but you can't, you know what I'm saying? Like, you put a value on that kind of leadership. Unfortunately, that really didn't stick. It really didn't stick. And you look at how he is now. I mean, he looks almost like a shell of his old self. He's out there making all these mental errors, and we could talk about the psychology aspect of it, the sports psychology aspect of it, and we'll get into that here in a little bit. But at the end of the day, man, this is a guy that just has no sense of leadership on this team at all. You know, like, and in fact, there's if you remember a couple of seasons ago, right, there was the whole thing with him and Jeff McNeil where it looked like they got into they were rumored to get into a fight, like, behind the scenes, right? There was like a scuffle. And then it was like that whole weird thing where they asked them both about it after the game, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we thought we saw a raccoon or a rat in the dumpster, and we ran over to see it, and that's all that was." But reality is they were fighting. They were fighting with each other. There was rumors that they just had a lot of friction. A lot of it was politically based. There was a lot of rumors about politics having playing a big factor in the decision to quote unquote shake up the core. Because they got rid of Brandon Nimmo, they got rid of Jeff McNeil, they let Pete Alonso sign with the Orioles. I don't know for a fact if all of those gentlemen are conservatives, but the rumor is Francisco Lindor, is a pretty big liberal, and his wife, works with the mayor. And guys, look, I'm not saying this to get into politics. I hate politics. Let me be very clear. I think both sides are horrible. I try to operate in the middle from a very neutral perspective. You're not going to hear me get up here and get into politics and bash one side or bash the other. I'm just simply bringing this up because I don't think politics should have anything to do with decisions that you make with this team. So when that rumor came out, when that was reported on, originally I kind of just laughed it off and just, didn't think it was real. But I'm starting to think that actually played a factor. And Lindor maybe had something to do with that. So, this is a guy that you could sit here all day and talk about all the ways he's falling short as a leader. And I could speak for hours about that. But I'll just say this, man, the guy needs to step up. He needs to step up. And if he doesn't, you got to start having the conversation of trading him. And with our luck, we'll trade him to another team. He'll win an MVP with that team, win a World Series with that team. That never fails. But look, if it's not working out here, you got to move on from him. And I think that conversation needs to start. It needs to start being had behind the scenes sooner rather than later. Let's talk about Juan Soto. Because, you can't really blame him for the Mets' losing streak. The guy's been on the IL for the last 2 weeks, so he kind of missed out on a lot of that. And he's really the only guy on the team that hits. I mean, he's by far and away the best player on the team. One of the best players in all of baseball. But a very selfish player. A very selfish player. Another overpaid diva. A guy that's getting paid almost $1 billion over 15 years to play this game. And they asked him recently, because he's coming off the IL, he's actually playing right now. I'm missing the game live as I'm doing this, but I know they're playing right now, and I checked. The Mets actually have a 1-run lead. I don't think it's going to hold. I don't think it's going to hold for very long. I think they're actually going to reach a 13-game losing streak tonight, but I digress. But they asked Juan Soto, they said, hey, while you've been away and you've been kind of watching this team struggle and you're watching this losing streak reach historic numbers, have you reached out to these guys? Have you tried to rally the troops? Have you tried to do anything? Anything at all? And this guy gets up there and says, no, not really. They've been away. They've been playing on the road, so, not too much. Bro, you're the top star on this team. And look, yeah, you're not the leader, you're not the captain, but you should embrace that role of a leader, because there's guys that look up to you. Guys look up to you. You're one of the best freaking players in the game. You can't pick up the phone and make a couple phone calls, send a few text messages. Give me a break. Give me a break. So, guys, the bulk of the blame has to be on the players. You put a lot of the blame on ownership. You put a lot of the blame on the guys in the staff making those decisions. You got to put more blame on the players. At the end of the day, man, they're the ones out there playing the game. So before I wrap this up, man, I do want to end on somewhat of a positive note, because I've been pointing out a lot of negative things, right? I've been saying this is what the problem is. This is systemically why there's a culture issue. I haven't really talked much about how do you fix it, right? I haven't really said much about how do we actually implement change. I hinted at it, but I never really dived into it. So let's talk about that. First and foremost, this team needs to get together, whether it's in the clubhouse, whether it's on a plane, whether it's in a bar. I don't give a damn where it is, man. In a box, in a fox with Courtney Cox. They got to come together, and somebody needs to step up, preferably more than one player, and the manager, and maybe even the owner, man, and the GM coming in there and having that conversation. Difficult conversations need to be had. They have to have those hard conversations. They got to make some moves, right? They got to potentially fire some guys, maybe send some guys down, maybe bring some hungry kids up from the minor leagues. I mean, you could say that's a bad move to make early in the season, but hey, man, I mean, this team doesn't look like they're going to make the postseason anyway, so you really want to send a message. Bring some guys up here that actually want to play the damn game, and that might inspire and fire up the veterans and the superstars, but of course you can't do that because contracts and everything. But there has to be that conversation. I mentioned earlier flipping the table. You got to have that direct conversation. But once it's made, once that's established, this is when we go back to, okay, let's elevate this team. Let's put this behind us. Let's find our identity. Let's find our purpose. Let's come together. And maybe coming together is, hey, look, everybody thinks we suck. Everybody thinks we are the worst team in the history of the game. Let's play to that, man. Let's embrace that. The same way that the 1986 Mets embraced being the most hated team in all of baseball, why not embrace being the perception of the suckiest team in baseball? You guys come together. You play harder than ever to prove everybody wrong. That could be your identity. That could be your purpose. There's still plenty of time to go on a run here, man. But that needs to happen. And relationships need to be built. I talked a lot about, you gotta fire guys. You gotta get in guys' faces. You gotta hold them accountable. And you do. Once that's done, though, you gotta build that relationship. You gotta bring that positive energy. Positive energy is invaluable, man. It is absolutely invaluable. And this goes back to the essence of transformational leadership, man. You can't build a winning culture if everybody from the top down is negative, if everybody from the top down is just angry and depressed and moping all the time, and nobody wants to talk to each other, nobody likes each other. Or even, look, hey, you could have a winning culture with guys you don't like. I mean, the 86 Mets are an example of that. I think they all hated each other. I think most of the documentaries I've watched, these guys wanted to kill each other behind the scenes. But they still played together as a team. And they still had a relationship, right? Maybe not the best relationship, but they had a relationship nonetheless. That needs to happen. And then you got to look at how are we blending the data, the analytics, with the human heartbeat. Because that's something that I really feel like this team is failing on. And I feel like they've been failing with it for a number of years. I think a lot of other teams in Major League Baseball are failing at this as well because, they become so absorbed in analytics. And guys, there's value to that. I'm not sitting here telling you that you shouldn't look at analytics. Clearly, there's a lot of value to that if you're using them correctly and, things kind of patterns develop. You can notice patterns and you can put guys in positions that benefit them based on how there's, what their exit velocity is and all these other different types of stats, right? So use the analytics, but don't forget, these are human beings. These aren't robots. These aren't androids. I mean, sometimes I wish they were because, man, could you imagine if the Mets had a team of androids? They would dominate. They would dominate, especially if they had Android 18 from Dragon Ball Z. She was freaking hot. That's how you guys know I've been rambling too much. I've been rambling way too much, and we got to wrap things up. But anyway, guys, man, look, there's human beings that play this game. You have all this money. Steve Cohen has all this money. I genuinely wonder how much of that money has been spent on hiring a professional sports psychologist. I know they have them. Every professional team has a sports psychology department. And I don't know who the sports psychologist is for the Mets. If you're listening, I'm not trying to say you suck at your job, but you kind of do. You kind of do. Because what are we doing? What are we doing? Steve Cohen, invest the money in hiring the best sports psychologist in the world. That should be your focus. You get somebody that can get these guys' minds right. These are professional ball players that have been playing this game since they popped out of their mama's womb, right? It's not a technical problem. It's a mental problem for a lot of these guys. Francisco Lindor is a perfect example. You know, you watch him make all these errors out there. That's not the Lindor that we've known, that we've seen make these heads up plays every single night and these phenomenal athletic plays. So there's something mentally wrong there. Who's working with the guy? You have all this money, but you're not spending it towards the right resources. And now you want to build this casino, and you want to put all this money in this casino, and that's a whole other topic for another day. But guys, in my opinion, those are really the key concepts, the key principles of how you turn this team around. There's a lot of other things there that we can talk about, but really it comes down to that, man. It comes down to leadership, accountability, finding your purpose, right? Finding your identity, getting guys together, right? And fixing the mind, right? Fixing the mind, because a lot of these guys are struggling mentally, and they need to have the resources to fix that. That's really what it boils down to. So, guys, we're going to wrap this up. I am starving. I hope you enjoyed this debut episode of the ChampMind Culture Podcast. A lot more coming your way. I'm looking to do these every Wednesday and Friday, and maybe sometimes over the weekend. Might have some guests here and there. Most of the time, it might just be me talking. So we'll see what's in store. But until next time, guys, if you're new here, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, and let everybody know that ChampMind Culture is coming to change the game. Boom! Have a good night, ladies and gentlemen.